if I bow out, I'll apologize ahead of time. I'm gonna try to make her through.
Thanks for joining us tonight for Live in the Mob. We will be with you momentarily, but we're making some final preparations, and who knows, maybe we're getting the guest finally all settled in. Be patient, give us a little bit of time. We'll be with you shortly. Thank you for joining Live in the Mob. We are almost ready. Hang on tight. Actually, this is the beginning of a 10-minute intro just to get people on and watching. Maybe you can go wash some dishes or do something. In all honesty, this is just so we can build the audience at this first part. Anyways, please hang tight. We will be back. We will be here. Thank you for joining Live in the Mob and watching.
Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Mob. It is Live with the Mob with Daniel, Craig, and Joey.
Two, three, can you hear me? Isn't this a lot of fun? Got it?
Thanks for joining us tonight for Live in the Mob.
Looking for royalty-free music? Discover
But
Epidemics.
we're making some final preparations, and who knows, maybe we're getting the guest finally all settled in. Be patient, give us a little bit of time. We'll be with you shortly. Thank you for joining Live in the Mob. We are almost ready. Hang on tight. Actually, this is the beginning of a 10-minute intro just to get people on and watching. Maybe you can go wash some dishes or do something. In all honesty, this is just so we can build the audience at this first part. Anyways, please hang tight. We will be back. We will be here. Thank you for joining Live in the Mob and watching.
Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Mob. It is Live with the Mob with Daniel, Craig, and Joey.
Thank you for being patient. By this point, you're a warrior. Thanks for joining Live in the Mob. We'll be with you shortly. Oh my gosh, why is this taking so long? I know. Welcome to Live in the Mob, where we care about how long you're placed on hold. Just be patient with us. We'll be with you shortly. Those of you in the service industry, just remember, an unanswered call is no complaint at all for customer service. Thank you, and we'll be with you shortly.
Thanks for tuning in to Try 5 Talk with your host, Daniel, Craig, and Joe, as they spend the next hour talking with special guests and talking tech and tips. All right, this week we are back. We are live here on YouTube, and we have with us special guest from Real Tuners LLC, Scott Clark. How are you doing tonight, Scott?
Good. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Awesome.
It's going well.
Very good.
Well, thanks for joining us, Scott. So give us a little bit of a brief background in how you got into motorsports and what drew you to motorsports.
Well, so we were talking here offline a minute ago. I started off as an IT guy, right? I was going to school for computer science in the early 90s. So I was always kind of nerdy or technical and homemade circuits and electronics projects and things like that. But I worked my way up through my IT career, and I guess, sometime around the late 90s, early 2000s, I started phasing out of that and kind of into my hobby, which had been fuel injection tuning. I think it started off with like so many of you guys, with my local street racing buddies. I guess I was just the computer nerd, and it became my responsibility when it was you're adding a supercharger or a turbocharger in the early 2000s to your street car. It got to the point where you had to have an aftermarket engine control system, and this was in the era of Speed Pro, the early Fast system before it was Fast XFI.
Okay.
DFI Gen 6 and Gen 7. That was about the era that I picked up on these things. Again, early, 2000, 2001 era, circa. But anyway, so as a hobby, I was tuning just for fun for local friends up there in the Omaha area. And I met Kyle from 1320 Video. I guess that would be where it really took off.
Okay.
It's funny, his very first video was made on my kitchen table on my computer. We were goofing around with
Was it really?
Yeah. We were friends. This is when Kyle was 17, man. This is a long time ago, late like 98 or 99. But anyway, so Jim Neuenfeld, the Parrish pickup truck. A lot of people knew that from 1320 Video.
Right, that was the blue.
The blue pickup truck, the Turbo LS 4-wheel drive pickup truck. There wasn't HP tuners for that family of engines yet. So I was into this Megasquirt homemade EFI system at the time because it was so cheap and fun to use and required a little bit of a soldering iron and things like that. So we put a Megasquirt on Jim's truck, and we'd go street racing and beating up on Vipers and taking these guys' money. And it got kind of popular, and we ended up going to Drag Week, Hot Rod Magazine's very first Drag Week, which 2005 or 2004, I think 5. God, I'd have to go back, and that's been a long time ago now. Anyway, we won the small block power adder class with a pickup truck, and that's when the phone started ringing off the hook for tuning work, and probably when I started charging for it, or really charging for the services that I was doing. And then what I did was I kind of plotted a trajectory where the goal was to make it so I ran out of vacation days at work to do my side hustle in evenings and weekends, to the point where I could retire from the IT career, transition out of that and into full-time tuning without taking a gigantic salary hit, if you will. So it took many years to figure out how to actually make money as a tuner. It's not nearly what people think. It's been an odd road for me, but it's included not owning a dyno. A lot of people are like, I gotta have a dyno if I'm gonna be a serious tuner. No, I think I've been in the majority of engine dyno rooms in this country, at least in the lower 48. And I've never owned one myself, but I do have, a $40,000 combustion pressure analyzer tool. So there are certain things that I've had to do, but,
so
I guess, go ahead.
In those early days of tuning, I mean, kind of where did remote tuning start to really happen? Like what was tuning someone's car like in the early days as like a consultant?
Engine Masters Challenge was accidentally my first remote tune. So I couldn't be at the event. It was 2009 or 10. And that was my first one of those. Now, Shane Tecklenburg had been doing it via PC Anywhere a couple years beforehand. You've probably heard of him. He's a good friend and often a competitor of customers of mine, or his customers are. But good dude. He's another one to talk to. He was doing it a little bit earlier, and I remember I was stuck on a flight, and I had the GoGo in-flight internet, and I wasn't going to make the event. And my friend Chris was running his engine at Engine Masters Challenge, and I was an IT guy. I had used TeamViewer before. I mean, at this time, I think it was PC Anywhere was what we were using, but it's a similar remote control program.
Right.
The first time I did it was from a flight in the air at 31,000 feet. And I told Chris, I was messaging him on Facebook. I'm like, dude, my laptop's working on GoGo. Download TeamViewer or PC Anywhere, and let's see if we can make this work. And it worked. And I literally, I was editing his timing and fuel and looking at his data logs between polls and making changes for him while he's competing at Engine Masters Challenge. If you guys remember, before there was the Engine Masters YouTube channel, Popular Hot Rodding used to run that as an engine builders event. And in my opinion, it was one of the premier engine building competitions on the planet.
Oh yeah,
there were guys. There are certain things about those engines that were running at Formula One level of technology that people don't realize. But anyway, that was my first.
So that was like kind of pioneering remote tuning. Like there was no real software setup or anything within the actual EFI software to do that. That was
no.
Now,
to this day, only Fuel Tech is the only ones that include it in their software. Actually, now you still have to use AnyDesk or a third-party program. But what's neat, if you run Fuel Tech, they literally have it built into their system where one tuner can connect to another right through their tuning app. It's pretty slick.
Cool.
So before your IT, obviously we talked a little bit about, you're in the IT world and everything. Where did you learn? And this is new to me because I have a small, a fuel injection on my car. Where did you learn the AFRs and the timing and all? Do you have a mechanical background in this, or how did you learn part of it?
I was pretty lucky. I grew up. So my grandpa was a farmer, okay, and he had 6 kids, and my mom was one of them, and she didn't marry a farmer, but we lived between the two sons that did farm. So long story short, I grew up on a farm my entire life from the time I was, was a toddler on up. I mean, by the time you're 8 or 9 years old, if you can't run a tractor, back then they'd send you off to special school or whatever. Right. So I grew up on a farm. And the other neat thing is I grew up, I was right across the road. This is in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I grew up outside of Fort Wayne in New Haven, in the east side. And I grew up near a little grass strip airport runway. And the guy there, he taught me how to work with my hands quite a bit, taught me a lot of well-rounded stuff, a little bit of electrical, electronics, a little bit of woodworking. We finished a fiberglass airplane, when I was in high school, and this has been the late 80s. And I got my pilot's license there. My trade-off for mowing the grass every weekend was I earned enough hours to get a pilot's license, flying over there. But between that and the farm, now the farmer did some tractor pulling. So I had been around some big inch methanol blower motors, unlimited type tractors. So I kind of had a feel, you grow up riding dirt bikes or mini bikes. All you guys probably did. I probably had the same feel for things that you did. It didn't take anything special. The place where I really learned the details was the Megasquirt project. If you were in the late 90s and early 2000s, Megasquirt is a do-it-yourself, like a Heathkit radio for EFI systems, much more affordable, but you can do very intense, very cool things with Megasquirt. Or you could, it's kind of on the downside of its curve here. There's some newer DIY fuel injection stuff nowadays, but I learned through that community how the electronic controls, should work. Like, what is an AFR table? What's an air fuel ratio table? What AFR do I want this engine to run at? Since then, I've probably learned a lot I get to work with some really high-end engine builders, where I'm definitely the junior guy, but like I got to spend some time with Ray Barton Racing, with Keith Dorton. You know, he's affiliated with the Hendrick program, with
Okay.
Cup car stuff. John Kazi, Tony Bischoff. I tuned for Tony Bischoff at Engine Masters, and I mean, just being around those guys, kind of learned, you know, the real final high-end stuff, I guess, that, you know, how to work on, how to set up a drag racing engine so it doesn't eat itself in 3 passes, that kind of stuff.
So you kind of
Very
got started with motorsport, but then from what I understand, you're kind of transitioned out into some other disciplines, you know, in the internal combustion world, but doing some other tuning.
There came a time where I had to make some money. I mean, you can go drag race tuning all year long. There's maybe 2 guys that make an honest to God living, or 3 guys just tuning and drag racing. A lot of guys, it's a side hustle for them too. They got to sell parts, or they do chassis fab work, or all the other truly hard stuff about building a car. But there's very few guys in just drag racing making money just tuning. You know, Steve Petty at Proline is probably my mentor in that department. But what I learned pretty quick was there are other places you can go. You know, I never have worked for what I call a tier 1 OEM like General Motors, but I've done work for marine engine manufacturers. I've done work for stationary engine manufacturers. I've done emissions certification for a couple of different applications. I've tuned forklifts on propane to meet emissions requirements. And I got into that type of business. I spent a couple years working for Blueprint, the crate motor people in Kearney.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're out here in Kearney,
if you
Nebraska.
know Norris Marshall, or Chris or Sean, any of the guys that run Blueprint, just one of the most kick-ass jobs a human being could ever have, as far as I was concerned. For 2 years straight, they parked me in an engine dyno cell and said, blow this shit up, find the limits of this, or we developed a NOx system for a marine engine company that's actually in boats, inboard and stern drive and V-drive type boats right now.
Right.
You know, I helped do the emissions tuning, and I developed a knock detection system for their factory computer. It was pretty cool. Those guys kind of introduced me to the stationary engine business too. So I have tuned, you know, pump jacks out in the high desert in northern Colorado and Wyoming and things like that, and down in Houston and the gas fields. You know, natural gas compressors, things like that have to run efficiently and not destroy themselves.
Right.
You know, just so I kind of got open to that world through the people there, because Blueprint doesn't do just crate engines. They do all sorts of, there's 3 different companies there that work together that do everything from marine and stationary stuff. It's pretty cool. So
ever been any push outside of like a piston engine, or do you do anything with any other sort of combustion?
So not up until about a year and a half ago. Well, and if you, okay, so a Bonneville project, I had been going to Bonneville for years because the drag week guys, Keith Turk, just basically said, you got to come to Bonneville. And he immediately, you know, it's like a heroin dealer saying, here, man, I'll stick in your vein. It's no problem. You know, the rest of your life is going to be to get dedicated twice a year. You're going to be there. So, well, I was approached by, let me back up. I had real success with a smaller streamliner of the 2 that the Vesco family owned.
Is that the one? I have the right now. I have the picture of the one. It's got a yellow and blue nose with kind of maroon behind it. Is that the car that you're talking about?
That's the Turbinator 2. That's the big sister.
Okay.
So long story short, they let me tune their small one for one of their customers, and I got to work with the NASCAR guys. And Keith Dorton built an engine for it, and we went 320 miles an hour on a 304 cubic inch naturally aspirated motor at Bonneville, which is 7,800 feet density altitude. Okay, so that thing is, you don't usually go fast up there. I think we were definitely the fastest mile per hour per cubic inch in anything that's naturally aspirated. And so we had good success with that. And about the next year, a phone rings, and it's Rick Vesco, and he's like, listen, you know, I got some really cool opportunity for you, but some requirements. We have this turbine car that we've been running since the 80s, and it's got a Chinook helicopter engine in it.
Is that
It's
like a
gas turbine.
PT6?
It's about, so a PT6, you can get them in like up to 1,200 shaft horsepower. This one starts at 5,500.
Oh,
So it's
Ooh.
a big
Wow.
dog, and there's 2 of those in
Okay.
a Chinook. Go ahead.
jeez.
So, anyway, so he's like, our problem is we've been trying to use electronic controls for this engine. Number one, they start at like $100,000 for the electronics. Number two, most of the electronic controls for these engines are meant for either helicopters or stationary natural gas compressors or generators for a city. That's where you'll find outside of a Chinook helicopter, you'll find a T55 Lycoming engine in like a public or a public utility running backup generators or water pumps or something like that.
Right.
So all the controls they had, they weren't appropriate for racing. And they had tried to make one of these work, and it scared the crap out of the driver because he's on the throttle. It took forever for it to start applying torque. He let out of it when it started spinning the tires, and it kept going for a while before it decided to slow down because it thinks it's hooked up to a water pump or an air compressor or something
It's
huge.
just a static.
So they were
static
like,
load.
hey, they're like, we'll let you tune this thing and you'll get all the credit if you can figure out an electronic control for a Chinook helicopter engine, basically. And
So
so we set about
how to throttle something that didn't come with kind of throttle logic.
exactly. So, and there's a whole series on my podcast where I explain about how it works in great detail. It's you can just search for Real Tuners Radio. That's pretty easy to find. But yeah, so I actually posted on Facebook pictures of the Bear circuit boards. I mean, guys, we actually started with the circuit boards and wrote software. It was kind of a step up for me. Usually I help test other people's development work. This time, just a small crew of 3 of us basically conceived and designed our own circuit board, had the circuit boards manufactured, put them into a case. So it looks like a little, like a Holley or a Fuel Tech ECU in a case, but it's meant for a Lycoming T55 turbine engine. We took 5 trips up to, go ahead.
Y'all got together and spec'd out these boards, the ICs and everything that y'all needed onto them, reached out
Yes,
to a
sir.
third party, how to manufacture, and it was just kind of we hope this works, or was there kind of how
No.
long did that take?
About 8 months, 8 to 10 months, I think.
Okay.
And they allowed me that engine on the engine dyno. Okay, this is it's a $1.2 to $1.5 million engine, for a fresh one. So I screwed up $70,000 or $80,000 worth of parts at one point because we had an EGT set up in the dyno that wasn't calibrated correctly, but they were willing to let us. They have a supplier who's one of the sponsors of their team who brings in the engines. He'll take timed out helicopter engines and put them in, take the good parts, put together an engine that's fresh and good. It can't go back into a helicopter, but we can put it in our application. So we had a parts guy keeping parts going, and I learned on the engine dyno in, of all places, Hooper, Nebraska, not far from you, Daniel. That's the only place where you can hook up on an engine dyno a Chinook helicopter engine in this country. Interestingly enough, there's another one up on the west coast of Canada, but it's because the EPA doesn't mess with you in a cornfield in Hooper, Nebraska.
Right.
But I set up camp there this last year. What did we figure? We had it was like 32 days of hotel bills I paid to stay up there in Fremont to do the work on this engine. And I kind of chronicled it on my Facebook, so you can scroll back there and see it. Yeah, we got this thing figured out. We took it out. We got it into the car. We had problems with COVID shipping delays. We couldn't make Speed Week in August with the car. We didn't have an engine. That sucked.
Oh, no.
So World Finals in October, the very last chance at an event last year, we got the car out there. We found out there was a bunch of wiring that needed reworked for the safety systems in the car. That's, if you look at the rear of that Turbinator 2, it's a clamshell that opens up, and then there's 3 different chutes that come out, right? And you have to have electronic controls that when the driver pulls the time to stop button, first it's got to open the doors and make sure that the doors got open. There's limit switches that you can detect from that. Then you launch the high-speed chute from 500 mile an hour, And that slows you down to something like 350. And then the second chute comes out, and you got to launch that. And then finally the last chute is a drag chute for the slowest mile an hour. All that sequencing has to go right. Long story short, that pushed us back like 3 days. And we only got to make one test pass on my system. And we had to shut it down at the fourth mile, the beginning of the fourth mile, because they wanted to test the parachute system that we had rewired and set up a new computer for.
That's
Right.
pretty important.
So the neat thing, though, in that test pass, in the first, second, and third mile, we set the ultimate records ever, the fastest first, second, and third. And it's actually the timing segments. It's the 2 1/4, the 2 to 3, and then the 3 to the 4.
Right.
I'm sorry. So it's the 2 1/4, the 2 mile, and then the 3 mile, which is the 3 to the 4. But we set records for all 3 of those incrementals on that test pass. So all the math says that this will be the first wheel-driven car to average more than 500 miles per hour over a mile and potentially back that record up.
Ooh,
Wow.
that's
moving.
That's exciting.
That's moving.
That's the
So-
world's fastest wheel-driven car. So we are pretty excited about that.
So
That's
we've
awesome.
gone from kind of motorsport to kind of tier 2 OEMs, boats, and even shaft turbines. One thing I kind of want to talk about, and this might resonate with a lot of people in the mob, rather in the last decade, we've had a lot of attention in tuning with no prep racing.
Mhm.
You know, where it started out, it still kind of is the Wild West, but it's become kind of a game of data. You know, coming up in maybe the last 10 years, how much business have you received from kind of the no prep scene, and how much experience do you have in there?
A lot. So about 40% of my work right now, and that's down from about 60 a couple of years ago. It's changing the landscape a little bit, but about 40% of my work you would consider some type of low surface prep drag racing. And that's been one of my specialties is power management and traction control. And a lot of people use a system that I kind of helped pioneer about 10 years ago for that type of racing. I mean, it's funny you say that. It covers everybody from the low dollar, low budget weekend warrior, no prep, back half of the track type racers or reverse direction guys, airport strips, all the way up to, we had Big Chief on our podcast. He tell you the story. I've worked with him for over a decade now. In fact, I'm going back to Justin's next week. So
Very cool.
they're to help him work on his small block nitrous motors, him and
Well,
Jackie's cars.
You know, I think for me, and I'm sure I'm not alone with guys that are going to watch this or friends of mine, because I'm not a drag racer. Love to. I don't have the time or money and stuff. But when
It's
Street
expensive.
Street Outlaws came out, and all of a sudden we're sitting there on a Monday night or whatever night it was, I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of
Yeah.
Wild West. And
And
so
3 million people were watching with you. At one point, it was the biggest show on television.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. And I'm sitting there going, because I'm thinking, 10-second quarter mile. I was always told once you get to 10 seconds, you got a good car on the street, and
Yeah,
I never
stop
knew,
there. I agree.
well, and I never knew about at this point EFI tuning and what they were doing. So when you get there and they're going, oh, I'm pulling power out, and I'm thinking, why do you pull power out? You want to use everything you got, but no, there's a science. There's a science to what they're doing, and I found that so interesting because I'd never seen a car race where somebody pulled out a laptop to review what they just did and move stuff around on the screen. And I didn't know what AFR was or, different timing, and we're going to pull some timing out. We're going to put some timing in. And I find that just interesting. So in the early days of like Street Outlaws, like you were just talking about Justin and stuff, were you pulled in right away to some of that, or that come with age, I guess?
In the small tire class, it hit the small tire guys first and stuck with them. Kamikaze, I was working on Chris's car, the El Camino, before it got super pro modified. I
Right.
guess that would have been 2017, 2016,
I think
2015,
so.
more like. But I worked with him. We actually, even when he had a carburetor, we had a hidden kind of quiet ignition control system on that car that would use timing retard to pull back power, and it had a front wheel speed sensors. and rear wheel speed. So what we would do is say, hey man, anytime the rear wheel gets more than X% faster than the front, yank a bunch of timing so that where it doesn't just blow the tire off, right? And,
Right.
and then honestly, that's the same exact a basic version of what the OEMs have been doing since the early 90s.
So kind of
But
creating
it
that
works.
feedback loop, creating that feedback
Exactly,
loop.
it is a feedback loop. Yep.
Well, we've
Well,
seen that expand exponentially now with drive shaft sensors, suspension sensors, just all this stuff. How hard has it been to keep up with technology from the tuners aspect as cars get faster and more parts are available to us?
It's funny. Some of it I keep up with, and some of it goes in different areas. So if you watch Fuel Tech is a real popular one with a lot of drag racers. I actually helped develop. Well, I did the proof testing for that system when Proline Racing. I was working with them on some other projects on an offshore boat thing, and they asked me if I would take this Brazilian ECU and evaluate it for them on their engine dyno on one of their engines, and tell them what I thought, what I would change, get some feedback. And that turned into a 2-year contract with them circa like 2012, 2013. And they basically had me work with the guys from Brazil to build that system to the spec that basically Steve Petty, Jamie Miller, me, a couple other guys provided the input for. And so I was really involved in their system. And it's funny, you asked about keeping up with the tech. Well, just up to about, I guess it was 3 seasons ago, NPK. I know you guys have talked to Robin Roberts or are going to.
Oh, well, we haven't really told our guests that he's coming on here.
Oh,
next
I just
week.
fucked that up. You can edit that out. I'm sorry, I didn't cuss too. Sorry.
No biggie.
But anyway, so no, one of the projects I did was testing a different way to detect chassis speed than using a wheel speed sensor, but instead by using inertia. And Fuel Tech, I was working on Robin's car. I'm pretty sure it's out now. This is 3 seasons ago. He was using inertia-based vehicle speed determination, which is badass because a lot of racing sanctions won't let you run the dual speed sensors because they know what you're going to do. But
That's
GPS
actually
is a little bit
genius.
slow. No, it's slick. And what they're doing is they're using what's called an IMU, an inertia management unit. It's a chip that consists of a accelerometer, 3-axis accelerometer, X, Y, and Z acceleration, a magnetometer, which is like a digitized version of a compass, only it can detect also 3 axes of
Pitch,
position.
raw, and yaw, yeah.
Yeah, pitch, roll, and yaw. And then a gyroscope, a sonic gyroscope. Okay, so that's more instantaneous pitch, roll, and yaw. But anyway, the other one will show you acceleration in pitch, roll, and yaw. But long story short, they were using an IMU chip. It's the same thing you find in modern motorcycles. So a motorcycle that can detect you're leaning over too far and going to spin out, it'll reduce power. The technology there that the Fuel Tech guys had gotten into on board, it's in the FT600s. And we got that figured out on Robin's car. And I mean, his guys, his crew chief and his personal tuner, like I was there when he's like opened up a laptop for the first time with Fuel Tech. And
Right.
that guy became so committed to learning that now he's a badass power management guy on NPK. I mean, Robin's always in the top 3. He's, if you look back for the last 3 seasons or so on NPK, I think Robin's probably the most consistent. He's not on number 1 podium all the time, but he's always up there in the top 3 or 4, runs a real consistent program.
Right. He's always fast.
They have been using the inertia-based power management.
Well, you actually brought up a good point there a second ago. I'm not trying to change gears, but our good friend Dee
Feel
Speed
free.
Shop,
I tend to wander.
Yeah, no, we got some good friends out there that are, they're carburetor guys, big inch guys, and what they do works. Their cars are fast, they're enjoyable. But let's say, let's back up to the layman and say, hey, we want to harness the advantages of EFI, but technology is racing ahead of us, and you're drinking out of a fire hose if you get on Google. What would be some good resources for somebody to start, or maybe good directions to start, at least getting into putting yourself in a position to start using EFI or tuning or things like that?
Start with something. Start a project that's super boring. Get like a junkyard Ford Escort or something from the 90s, right? But something
Right.
that you can drive daily on the street, and put a cheap ECU on it. Use the factory electronics as far as the injectors, sensors, and that kind of stuff. But take like a Holley Terminator X or something like that as a popular one and make it work with that, and you will learn tuning so fast, especially when it's on some kind of driver that you're messing with cold starts every day. You have to force yourself into it, because we as hot rodders always have 100 projects going on. Oh, I spent 15 minutes last month with my EFI, but next month I totally forgot whatever the hell I did.
Yeah.
Get yourself absorbed with it, but don't put it on the nice kick-ass project right off the bat. Do that one second, because your first one, you're going to learn how to troubleshoot everything, and that's really what any monkey can adjust air fuel ratio, right? That the tuning is easy. It takes me 5 minutes on a $400 tune to remote tune to do the tuning. What I'm spending all my time doing is identifying your problems. Like most people who switch to an EFI system, they have nothing tells them, hey, guess what? Your alternator is probably worn out. And it's probably making such bad voltage power noise and spikes
Some ripple
that you don't realize yet that it's gonna your Holley your Phytech or your Holley Sniper isn't gonna run at all. It's gonna run like shit. It's
check your diodes, people.
Yeah. Well, and I have a whole webinar on my website about, it's a 2.5 hour long presentation on proper power and grounds. What's really truly proper.
And you've touched on two bases now. As I told you during conversation, I've got the Phytech system I put on mine, and I've got just a 355 small block with a supercharger root style blower on top of it. And I know nothing. I researched what AFR was and my idle air control, all of this stuff, so I could learn. And I had help, getting it set up. But I've had to do the fine tuning. You've touched on cold start. You only get about 2 cold starts a day of actual cold starts to tune it, because
it's every 8 hours. You're supposed to let it sit for at least 8 hours between even 1 to 2 starts. Yeah. And
then RPM noise, insulating the right wires. I can't remember which one is, but it goes to the coil, and I put rubber, insulated rubber over that, and then with the metal tape, with that metal foil tape, and that worked.
Yeah.
And then I've had trouble with the my alternator, because once you start getting down into that low 12 volt range, and you've got electric fans and everything's running off it, it starts to cheat that. It starts to cheat that system a little bit.
Did you ever do a spreadsheet that shows how much amp draw, how much current all the electricals in your system, your EFI system, were going to draw before you hooked it up and found out your alternator probably wasn't enough? No, most guys don't know how to do that. Yeah.
Honestly, right from the get-go, just from talking to a few people there, because I don't run a stereo in my car. So it's just, obviously I have electric fuel pump. I've got electric fan, and then the Phytech. And so I went to 150 right away. That's,
that's pretty good. Man. Yeah. But there's some other things, for example, about alternators. Just because their charging output isn't a condition or a state of their health. They're actually a wear item. Again, on my podcast, we had the MechMan alternators guys, Tony Bolton. Those guys talked like all the shit that can go wrong with alternators. Like they can put out voltage spikes and still be charging and capable of current. But if your ECU sees a 20 volt spike, it's going to reset and shut off. The CAN bus is going to turn off. So there's even more to it than that. But your old MSD box, your 6A analog box, would be perfectly happy with that, with your carburetor, and not know the difference. So there's things like that can bite you in the ass. But I mean, continuing on that, just before take a class. Like if you're doing Holley, Tom Kais puts on a really good class. And I say that because I've had a lot of people come to my class that I do, and they, I've been told that if you go to the Holley class and then go to my class, you should be able to get your car running absolutely fine and racing all by yourself. I've been told that by probably 30 different people that did both classes.
That's a good point.
Go ahead.
A lot of us folks are, we're in 2019 and 2020, Holley's come out with their Terminator system, and it's, it's for kind of wreck guys. We're LS swapping our junk. And we've got this big white box that it supposedly has everything we need to plug it in, run the little wizard, and get our car running right. How close or not close will that setup get the layperson, and how much, at what point would you recommend reaching out to a tuner to get some assistance?
if everything goes perfect, you can YouTube and Google your way into a pretty damn good tune, I think, on Holly. There's enough info out there. The problem is there's enough bad info or enough missing info about the ancillary systems or the things that can shoot you in the foot that your likelihood, about 40% of the guys that set out to do it on their own get there and do something reasonable. The time you should reach out for a tune for a guy like me is if you aren't a hobbyist. So a good portion of my customers are people who probably can tune by themselves, but need something to happen fast. A good example, Larry Larson, awesome tuner.
Love that guy.
100
Yeah.
times better at everything than me, with the exception of maybe electronics and EFI, and he's this close to catching up. I mean, he's super sharp. But he can build a race car. I can't stick two pieces.
Oh
of metal
yeah,
together.
most definitely.
I worked with him on his truck, and what happened was Proline. We were developing Fuel Tech. I had just Keith Berry's car. If you follow radio racing and Lights Out, Keith Berry's car was a back-to-back NMCA champ in Radio versus the World. He was first. Big Chief was second. Larry Larson was
Right.
third to get Fuel Tech. And all three of those Proline assigned me to go do the install, tune the car, make sure everything worked, report back, because it was field testing. And they were absolutely dedicated to having someone in the field with each of those three guys saying, hey, if you're going to be our guinea pig, we'll send some monkey out there to make sure that the stuff works. And that was me, luckily enough. So working with Larry, I mean, I learned, for anything I did for him, I learned 100 things back. I was up there for about 3 weeks. Then I went on drag week with them. I rode shotgun with another customer I tuned so that I could be there at the event. They let other competitors help other competitors. It was legal. So I kind of,
Right.
I helped Larry and I rode with him. There's pictures of me driving and tuning and stuff like that. So I learned from guys like him all kinds of ancillary stuff about drag racing, but that I guess that was where I was going with that. That was how I ended up working with Larry on that stuff, because Proline Fuel Tech wanted someone to kind of babysit that stuff as it was being developed. So, and also get feedback from guys like Larry on, hey, what can we do to improve the system?
Yeah, so
we're kind of-
that's a really cool point about kind of what it looks like in the upper echelons of racing. Coming back down to where me and my friends ride around with junk. We're swapping, we're learning these tunes, we're crashing into problems, we're going lean, we're doing all these bad things, but we learn as we go. One question I want to ask, you mentioned ancillary systems, things that might bite you in the butt later. What are some common areas? Because an LS swap or an EFI swap is not just an engine and a computer,
No,
but what are some
so
common areas
Vernon,
that you see overlooked?
ignition systems causing problems with RPM and crank and cam position sensors, right? So guys have got solid core race wires and 5671 R9 plugs, the old race plugs that are non-resistor, and they make a shitload of noise, and the digital electronics can't tolerate them. That's one of the big ones. I actually keep a database, so I knocked out about like 270 remotes last year, I think, is what it ended up being. And I keep a database of every problem we run into. I can actually tell people, number one, what's the most common problem based on your symptoms that you're most likely to find, and number two, what are the most common fixes?
That's kind of cool. You can just run a regression on your own data and see
exactly.
See what the
and
problem
there's over
is.
15,000 engine dyno pulls in that database too. So all kinds of parts combos and stuff. I've been around a lot.
A lot of value in that experience.
Yeah, there is. And honestly, you know what? It's finally coming down to the same thing in tuning that it was in IT. For 20 years, people argued, Motec, $20,000. It's got to be better than Holly for $2,100 or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. I must be the better tuner. No, you know who the best tuner is? The best tuner is the guy that can accomplish your goals as quickly as possible for the lowest total price with as few problems as possible. And without any other, unnecessary BS, without spending any more money than you needed to.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so it's just like any other business, right? You want the guy that can do the best job the fastest. It's no different than picking somebody doing tile. So that's what it's boiled down to. And so I've tried to make sure, keeping that database is one of the things that keeps me competitive against.
Well,
Everybody's a remote tuner this last 2 years.
It gives you a lot to go back on and see, okay, well, this problem was here and this looks similar, so let's check it out. And
Yeah.
it gives you a reference point to go back to.
So an example, he brought up what are the things you run into. So some of the top ones, if you're doing an LS swap, if you use any of the series of LSs that have the front mounted cam sensor on the front of the timing cover, you're more than half likely to have a no start condition because you removed that little extension harness that came from GM and plugged the Holley or the factory computer directly into the sensor, not realizing that factory harness flipped the outer 2 wires.
Oh,
so
no.
That's like when someone calls me with a no start condition on a brand new LS, I'm like, all right, I'm going to act like this took me an hour to figure out. I'm not really. But no, it's almost always that.
We've
Scott,
got
a lot of things.
We've
Scott,
got
when
somebody
you're doing your remote tunes, or and I know we're talking a lot with race guys and stuff, but if you just have a guy that's running hot on the street, he wants to, be out running stuff. If I was to call you, no matter what system I have, and I said, you want to do a data log, what's your instructions on doing a data log? Because obviously you're not doing 1/8 mile or 1/4 mile. What kind of information are you telling them for a data log and how to record
Oh, so what I do is I'll usually instruct them to make sure they're doing it right. So if it's a Holley, start your data log on your handheld or a Vitec. I still work with those sometimes. But I'll make sure to instruct them on however they're going to do the data log. It could be the laptop, it could be the handheld. Usually I get on the phone and walk them through it the first time anyway. I don't like to be that, hey, just email me your file, because a lot of these guys aren't quite comfortable doing that yet, or sometimes. So what I do is I just walk them through the first one, but I'll let them drive for 10, 15 minutes. Just go drive and I'll look through the whole log. And you probably want to know what I'm looking for. I can talk about that too if you like.
Well, I was curious because when I hooked up my Vitec, I had one shop here locally does installs of them. So it was really reasonable for 100. I got it up and running, but there was no tune and it was idling fine. And I had, of course, adjusted the idle air control and just got it running. And so I brought it to this shop here locally, and they just basically get them up they're not looking for performance necessarily. They're just looking to get it running and reliable. And it was $150 tune, and I couldn't complain. And they found I was having trouble with warm starts. And what it was I had we had power wires backwards on one part. I can't remember if it was a white wire or whatever it was done. Anyway, but they found that. So and took care of that. And there was the cold start issue because they have a lot of base numbers from their previous customers, and so they kind of know where to start. And the cold start was the worst. But now since then, of course, I've had other issues. So I've sent data logs to Vitec, and their customer service has been good to me. But there's a lot of complaints on anything on the internet if you look at it.
Everybody thinks sucks because they don't know what's the actual problem is. I know what you mean.
I said, hey, I'm having trouble on this start and I'm having trouble with this part. And it took 3-4 days, got an email back, said, here, adjust this, and boom, it solved an issue. The guy was really good that I dealt with. And I'm like, I think his name was Bryce. And so real nice guy, dealt well, so it took off. And just through the forum pages, and there's a lot that you can play with the acceleration, especially you can speed up your acceleration and your deacceleration and stuff that I've had to learn. And but I talked to one tuner, and I kind of want your opinion on this and where I'm going, because there is no tuners up here. And I've tried calling the 8 dyno shops in the area, and they don't touch Vitec. They don't care. They said $100 a pole, then you retune it. And I'm like, no, I want somebody to tune it, So I talked to one guy, and he tunes for a living up here, and he does a lot of things, everything from snowmobiles to side-by-sides, everything. And he told me, he says he doesn't want the dyno. He wants to sit in the seat with me because he wants to feel the pull, and he wants to hear it and how it goes. Do you like that thought process?
Oh, I can totally feel what that guy's saying. I mean, it took me 15 years of that before I was comfortable doing it remotely. It's much easier to feel what's going on when you're with the car and you can hear it. In fact, a lot of guys I'll have do a video chat so I can hear the engine, what it's doing. The best tools you have for tuning, bar none, is your nose, your ears, and then your eyes.
Right.
So it's I totally agree with that guy. If you can, make a business out of it, for example, was it I guess yesterday I went down to Travis Ball's shop in Northwest Arkansas, Ball Metal Fabrication. I tuned some crazy monster truck thing for SEMA, like a 50s Willys, just that was literally like 12 feet in the air. I tuned 2 swapped car or square body trucks that Travis is working on. Then I went to Kenny Davis's Cat Rods by Kenny Davis. He built some badass stuff. I'm sure he's built some Tri-5s in his day. But I went there and tuned some stuff. But anyway, I like to go on site with people. You know, I did a drag racing Coyote Mustang the other day that was on a hub dyno, and I'd prefer to be in person 100% of the time if I can. You just can't, you know.
Yep.
And there's a lot of guys where I'll work with, I'll send somebody, I'll get 90% of the tune done, and then, hey, get so-and-so to help with the spool because they're on site with you at the track, people I trust.
No, you gotta trust but verify a lot. You know, when you got a problem coming up to you. I had a guy call me
strictly by experience, man. There's too many YouTube tuners. I mean, there's guys out there who would have you believe that they do real stuff, and they've been doing it for like 2 years and they've touched like 5 cars. So what I always say about someone is I'm like, it's not how much they brag to me. It's not it should not be how someone impresses you with their Facebook posts. I mean, there's some scammy tuners out there. It's science, whatever. No, you don't know what you're doing. But you look at if that tuner has a significant list of vehicles that were successful in their goals that you can refer to, right? Like if a tuner tells me that he is super amazing at street strip cars, then I should find at least 1 or 2 drag week class winners that he's tuned. That's just kind of my line of thinking. If you're awesome, kind of truly awesome at it, you know, then if you've got like a side-by-side or a snowmobile guy, hey man, if you know somebody who's racing successfully on his tune and his work, and they're winning some events or they're hitting their goals or they're not pissed off at their tuner, that's a guy to go talk to. Yep. You know, it's verifiable experience, qualifiable experiences.
Now, checking that pedigree, checking that feedback.
Hang on a second here, Joe. We got somebody in the chats. I think it's Jed Gage. He says Richard Nabal did the initial remote tune, and he's looking to do a new E85. He's wanting to know if that's something that he could get a hold of you on, and if you're close to.
So my email is scott@realtuners.com. Now Richard Nedball he's a good tuner. Does he not do E85? He might not do flex tunes or E85. I never realized that. But Richard's one of the guys that I work with, and he's been a remote tuner for a long time. Him and I have been going at this for a long time, 10 or
what's
more years.
What's your current remote tune schedule look like? If we want to
so how I do it is I remember now I support a lot of shops too, right? So I make it so I'm never booked more than 24 hours out. So if that guy called me tonight, I could get him in tomorrow. Awesome. I space my appointments out so I don't have any more than 2 brand new ones during the day. And then, you know, each initial tune might take an hour or 2. But a follow-up tune or do a quick fix or look at logs might take 10 minutes. So I no more than 2 of the big appointments a day, and then I fill in the blanks so I can take on last-minute guys like that.
But speaking of appointment, you've got a class and a podcast. So in that class, tell us kind of about the format of that class and who that would be.
It changes. Sometimes I'll do one just in general for standalone EFI. This time I've been asked to do a Holley-specific class, and I'm including snipers and TBIs for the first time, and I'm going to just cover the Holley products. COVID, now I used to do 1 or 2 classes a month up through from 2014 or 15 up through like 2020, I guess. The COVID thing absolutely destroyed the catering industry, the table and chair rental places. It made it really hard to put on events. So I did no classes in 21, and I've just started doing them again. I've got one in Florida because that's a state that's not restricting us. And I'm going to do another. Get ready. I'm going to announce one here for 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri, here in another couple days. That's going to be probably the early first weekend in May or. Anyway, exciting. I do this class to be complimentary. Really complimentary to the Holley class that they teach. They teach you what all the buttons and functions do in the software. I teach you how to take that tool. I teach you how to take that paintbrush and paint a Mona Lisa or a Sistine ceiling.
When and where to press the buttons they taught you.
Yeah, but it's nice to have Holly. I mean, the guys that leave my class that already went to Tom Kaiser's class, they go home and kick ass. There's a lot of people that have been to my class that started off not doing any EFI tuning and now are doing a ton of EFI tuning. So I'm actually really proud of the people that go home and then hit me up on Facebook a week later. Dude, I totally got my car running with your help without paying another tuner. Thank you. That's what I get off.
Teach a
on.
man to
But that's
fish.
what we try to do. Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, exactly. I get more adrenaline rush out of that now than I do being the
Yeah,
Facebook tuner guru
It's
or
a
whatever.
it's a problem when you run in a very technical world where people come to you and say, "Just fix my problem." As soon as they fix it, they forget all about it, and they're going to be
Yeah,
back.
and
when they have another
you're
problem.
only as good as your job for them too. I mean, I had guys that I tuned for years, and everything turned out great. One time something goes wrong, and whatever, blah blah blah. That happens sometimes. That's just business. I don't think they mean to be that way sometimes, but it happens.
We've got another
So-
question from Jed here. He's got a beautiful 57 hardtop with a big block. And he's got a question. He wants to know if he should stick with his MSD6 ignition on his Dominator ECU application.
Yeah. You should, right up to the point that you can save up for a crank trigger, a cam sync, coil packs. Getting rid of a distributor is a good upgrade down the road for longevity reasons, probably more than anything. But I'm okay with that ignition if it's working for you right now, if everything's working. And a street application, maybe you don't need crazy timing retards or things that distributors limit you to. But the one thing to remember is that cap, the rotor, and the wires are all wear items for a distributor. But if you switch to coil and plug, you could run a practically free set of LS coil packs on that application. And he may already have a crank trigger, an MSD
Yep, he
crank
says he's got
trigger
a
or
crank
something.
trigger.
Yeah, man, he's an inch away from going coil packs. He should contact me offline.
Yeah, he just
But,
said it's a crank trigger is what he just typed.
Yep. Okay. No, he's real close. My upgrade would be going to coil packs. But not absolutely necessary. It depends on, if he's forced induction, then you start pushing the limits of a distributor. The whole problem is you have that gap inside the distributor where there's two sparks in the system. It takes a lot of energy to arc that, and that energy is subtracted from what ends up making it to the plug. Well, if you start running 20 pounds of boost with a supercharger or a 300 shot of nitrous, then you're going to need more spark energy. You're going to blow that spark out. So
Right.
if you're not blowing spark out and it's good, fine. If you're looking for next winter's project, coil near plug, definitely.
Okay.
Nice. So
Now,
I love the technical talk, but we're kind of running up to our time here. You have
Yeah.
a podcast that we can kind of tune into to kind of hear
Uh-huh.
some of this technical stuff, right?
Yep. It's Real Tuners, one word, Real Tuners Radio. Okay, so you can find that on all the podcast sites. About half the time, we just talk amongst ourselves. I get a panel like you guys. There's 5 or 6 or 7 of us, and we'll just literally just take questions for 2 hours from the audience, or we'll have a guest on, somebody appropriate to the topic, like chassis tuning for drag racing. Again, if my episode 86, I think it was, where Big Chief came on, one of them, you find out what kind of guy he really is when he literally breaks down everything he knows about getting that big tire car down the street. I got more compliments, not just because it was cool, because it was Big Chief, but because that guy shared amazing info. Jack Beckman, there's a whole bunch of topics on there, but you can find us on YouTube as well, Real Tuners Space Radio, and on Facebook on Scott Clark. I live stream it's about every other Wednesday when we can get the guys together. It just depends. Sometimes everybody's working and we don't get one off, but usually we try to
We have
live
the same
stream.
thing. Same thing.
Yeah,
here.
it's the same deals with you guys. It's fun though. It's
oh.
fun to get everybody together once a week.
Yeah.
So we're the
So
Tri
it-
5 mob. So it's obligatory that we ask a couple Tri 5 questions here. Out
Fire
of
away.
out of
And,
out of the
and
three,
real
which
quick,
one's your favorite? Oh, what's up?
What?
well, go ahead, Joe.
Out of
So
the three
which one was my
Tri-5s.
favorite to do?
Yeah, that's it.
Well,
It's a cross between it's probably Greg Sanford's, because it's just the craziest Tri-5 ever. He put a Proline blower engine, put a big ass roots blower on top of a Proline motor, on the lowest boost we could find, it made like 2,900 horsepower on their engine dyno. And he had me go down to Ball Georgia to tune it on their engine dyno. And then we brought it back. He shoved it in this beautiful 55 that his father owned. No, it's been in his family. I think it's been in his family. He's the third generation. They bought it new, right?
Right.
And he calls it Nadine. And you had pictures of it. You were showing it. He was showing it. He's had it out. That's probably one of my favorites because, you know, John Holmeyer wired it. I mean, they treated this car like like the nicest resto mod you've ever seen, meets pro mod, meets street car with a little touch of Larry Larson worked on it, made it more streetable. You know, and it's still like a 3,000 horse deal that, you know, it's great for giant burnouts and things like that. But that's probably one of my favorites. God, who was Lewis up in St. Louis? You guys know the orange one, right? Lewis.
Oh yeah,
Lewis Jackson.
He's on the mob. Lewis Jackson.
Yeah, Lewis Jackson. That's my other. That might even be my. That's a tie. It's a tie with him and.
The guy that we were just asking questions for is Jed Gage. He's got a beautiful 57 with it's dark blue metallic with a white top and 1071 and everything. When I first met Jed was on Instagram. His handle is old Betsy 57, something like that. And he wanted a mob hat. I said, well, I'm going to the Nationals. This was in 19. He goes, all right, I'll see you there. And that's how I saw him. And he was parked right next to Lewis Jackson, I believe. This like right next to him or right, you know, one car away. And those are two beautiful cars, you know. And that's,
Lewis's car is amazing. It's totally amazing. And he drives and beats the shit out of it. And currently we're trying to work through he's got some weird issues with the motor, had some weird stuff going on, and it took us a while to figure it out, but I think he's regrouping on that, and we'll have that thing back out here sometime.
I haven't seen anything on social media with him in a while. He's been laying low, quiet.
Yeah, his business is super busy. Like I go up to visit him in St. Louis when I go to, for him, another one I like to do in person. And it's been a busy couple of months. He's like remodeling a house, adding a shop on for a guy, or building a shop for a guy down the street. His business, he owns his own business, is super busy. He kind of works in spurts, but if you've seen that car, I mean, he was street racing that car with the Kansas City crew, which is the fastest street racers in the country. I don't care what anybody says.
Fighting words.
And Lou was out there. Hitting it up next to the Goodfar and big badass street guys. And I gave credit. Lou's got balls.
I can't remember the reason why, but at the Tri-5 Nationals back in 19, I wanted to see him run, but I can't remember. He didn't run, or it was overheating, or something was going on with it. He couldn't run it. But that thing is beautiful. Just like Jed. I mean, Jed's car has got a big monster, scoop or blower coming out of the hood and everything, and it's more of a show car because it's done to perfection. Yet I can't remember what he said, but the horsepower is way up there, and
the 1071 blower, cars. The potential is large. Yeah.
Yep. Fat tires like my mother-in-law. Everything. It's right there.
I like cars like that. Tri-5 with a big roots blower sticking out the hood, or any kind of blower sticking out the hood.
Yeah, I'm the idiot that stuck a small roots blower under the hood, so I overheat all the time because I don't have an open hood. So I got to figure that.
What's the point? You might as well just put a gear drive on it and pretend the same thing, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, let me give you a quick lesson before we kind of lose something about blowers and inlet temps. A lot of people don't catch, but I've tested this in my classes a lot. So one of the most important things about making power is the temperature of the air charge coming into the motor. A lot of these blowers don't have any kind of cooling underneath them, and they heat the air up to 300-400 degrees. Well, the first thing that happens, you can't run pump gas because pump gas lights on its own above 200 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So if you got a blower combo that's getting you to 200 or above, you got to run better fuel. You got to start looking at things like C16 or C12, whatever, or E85 is a good choice with that. But one of the things we learned was on a 1,000 horse combo, let's call it a small big block or a big inch LS, whatever, every 1 degree Fahrenheit is worth anywhere between 1.5 and 2 horsepower at the wheels. Okay, you can reduce that inlet air temp. So an intercooler that's knocking out 200 degrees of air temp from a turbo or a pro charger setup or a blower is giving you 400 horsepower.
So is that like
one of the things I've run into? Go ahead.
Like the latent heat of vaporization, like would that apply too, or would it just be the air charge?
A little bit. So ethanol has a little bit more latent heat of vaporization effect than gasoline does, right? But you can also run it richer since it's an alcohol, and you can get some cooling effect in the chamber that way. But it's not so much the fuel as the fuel has more tolerance, more high octane, more tolerance for that heat, a little bit hotter.
So is that,
but my
that
point
air
was,
charge?
I had guys put blowers on a big block boat motor and picked up no horsepower at all, but they put like 8 pounds of boost on, but they added like 100 degrees of temperature. So they lost 200 horsepower that the 6 or 7 or 8 pounds of boost was trying to claim. So you got to make sure if you're adding, the blower, and you're looking to get the power out of it, you got to make sure that that air is cooled somehow. Get that thing on top of some kind of sandwich cooler.
Craig,
That-
you're about
that
to
might-
go fast.
Okay, so I've had this discussion with many guys because I've got a Wyand 177 roots blower, and I've
Yeah.
got less than an eighth of an inch to spare under my hood, from everything there, because I kept it stock looking. And I
Yeah.
run into, when we're down in Kentucky and it's 90 degrees, stop and go traffic, it's getting hot. And so I learned on the Phytech, which I didn't know, there's a screen I can go to it and it can tell me the air inlet temperature. I had never looked at that before.
Oh,
And
yeah,
as-
that's exactly what you want to watch. That's
and
what I'm talking about.
on,
Yep.
on a 90-degree day, I was starting to push 210 on my on my gauge. I'm like, okay, I'm pushing 210. I got to stay out of it. Just get to the hotel. And
Yep.
I look at that air inlet temperature, and she's closing in on 400 degrees because you've got the headers.
Yeah.
Nothing's
And you know
moving.
what's
The pave-
funny?
The pavement's
It's
200
actually
degrees.
it loses its accuracy after 256. That GM air temp sensor. So when it starts skyrocketing like that, all you know is you're
Yep.
somewhere up above 300
Once
degrees.
you're
So-
like 6 standard deviations out on that thing at that point.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
My first thought is, hey, I know I want to put a larger radiator in it because I have an aluminum one, but it looks old school because I wanted the old school car look, but I don't
Yeah.
think it's doing its job. And then I thought about doing the cold air intake snorkel to get air from outside to come in so it runs. And I've got
Yes.
mine's a mild build. It's basically a 350 horse 355, and I put the blower on it. I had 525 dynoed with 6 pounds of boost. It's just a mild build. And
I
Sure.
still think you're way
noticed-
overdriven, Craig.
But this fall, when I went out for a drive and it's 45, 50 degrees, it
Feels
wakes
awesome,
up.
doesn't it?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
like there's
Look at that
100
inlet air
horsepower.
temp. Look at that inlet air temp, man. So just know that it's on your engine. It'll be a 1.5 horsepower per degree. You'll gain 1.5 horsepower for every degree down that inlet air temp. Something to think about in your blower combo. That may be a fake number because it's picking up temperature from the surface around it. Okay,
Yep.
if the sensor's mounted
Yeah.
in the blower, it may not be well isolated. So what you might do, but you talked about underhood air. If it's sucking hot underhood air, definitely get a cold air inlet to it, because we've shown on Pro Chargers and turbos and even roots blowers that if you suck air from a cold location, it won't get as hot coming out of the blower.
Well, and see that I've done some research at where I want to drag the tube through and because I wanted it old school, but honestly, I want it more drivable. And
Sure.
where I'm in Minnesota, so most of the time I don't have a problem with temperature, but I noticed the difference from a 90-degree day to this fall. It was under 50 degrees, almost on the cool side, and I took it out and got up to about 4,000, let off, and then just hammered it, and both tires rip loose. The front end comes up.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
You
No,
probably got
it's-
300 more horsepower than on a hot day.
Davers, Pete, I'm telling you, it felt so
Yeah.
good. I was like, okay, I've got to
Yeah.
do something. So
Yeah, you got to
Start
manage
doing
those
those
temps.
boost weather
That's
posts on
where that's the
Instagram.
reason you see guys with Pro Chargers and then a separate intercooler and then go into the motor.
Right.
It doesn't look as cool, but they're getting really good control over those inlet air temps. And that's
And-
the biggest thing. That's also why you see an intercooler on every single vehicle that comes with a turbocharger from a factory somewhere, whether it's a diesel
Yep.
semi or a pickup truck or a car with a turbocharger. It's got an intercooler. There's a reason why. It's basically you need that horsepower. It also works for efficiency too.
I guess I'm cutting holes in the original metal through the wheel wells or somewhere. I got to get that tube going out.
Hey, that's what you got to do to get it cooled down some. So
He just convinced me now, So now let
Work
me
on
ask,
it. What I would do
Yep.
is I would add some data to the car. I would look at those inlet temps before the blower and after.
Yep.
And you get an idea what kind of efficiency the blower is or isn't doing. I mean, actually, maybe don't do that because you're just going to be pissed at me and you're going to be shopping for a new blower.
No, because well,
think-
I know here's the deal.
I
My
think-
number was 500 horsepower when I brought it to an engine
Yeah.
shop. He said,
Yeah.
he says, "Oh, you got a great block here. Let's just do this." Right. And so
Let me be brutally honest with you. 500 to 600 wheel horsepower on a real chassis dyno is the most I recommend on the street. You're going to have so much more fun with that, and you won't be any faster on the street unless you turn that thing into a true street racer, in which case it drives around like a combine or a green truck anytime it is
Yeah.
fun to
Right.
drive.
Me.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I
Well,
know what
I
that's
like
like.
that
I think-
number.
I
though.
think
That
the
sounds like
point
a
here
perfect
is
build. Everybody wants to talk about 1,000 or even 2,000 horsepower. 500 or 600 at the wheels, the most you want for a fun street car, because after that, instead of being a fast street car, what you get is a slow race car. That's kind of the next phase.
I love that.
So,
yeah,
I just
I've
stay
done
with a
that
fast street
before.
car. Don't build a
Drive-
slow race car.
driving the
So
big
I
small
think-
block on the
I
street
think we've
with,
demonstrated here
ladder
the-
bars and
the
coilovers.
I'm sorry, what, Daniel?
Oh, I said that I've done that before. Driving driving it on the street, ladder bars, coilovers, 456s, or even the 538s.
It's like
at one
driving a
point in
grain
time.
truck, man. It just
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
feel right.
And you got the straight
I think
cut
we've
gears in the
demonstrated
Doug
tonight,
Nash,
the
so.
kind of technical, how efficiently, discussions like this can be incorporated into our cars. So for stuff like that, your podcast and your class is going to be big for anyone with questions, kind of like what we just talked about. So, I think,
We love to
I
have
think-
them. Ask away.
yeah. I think
Well,
closing
that's
out.
It's something fun. It's something fun. It feels like I'm giving back to the community when we do the podcast. We don't even monetize our YouTube channel or anything like that. I use it as an advertising outlet for my business, and it's properly sized and it works good. I let people know when I have a class. The thing that kind of sucks is the classes sell out quick, but I'm trying to get those back up to where there's enough of them somebody can hit them, and they'll be in different places around the country. But look for that. You can follow us at Real Tuners LLC. We have a website, realtuners.com. My email is simply scott@realtuners.com. We talk about our remote tuning, our podcasts on the website. We talk about, I have some webinars that I sell for 10 or 15 bucks. It depends on which one. You can watch a 3-hour webinar on proper power and grounds, or how to start Holly for the first time, that kind of stuff. But
Awesome.
that's kind of what has kind of kept me afloat and happy in this business.
very informative, Scott. I certainly appreciate talking with you. It was fun.
Yeah,
Thanks for
I
having
really-
me. Yeah, we'd like to do it anytime. Now we're going to try to have you on my podcast here. We want some of you guys to be a panel for us here
Awesome.
coming up soon.
Well,
It'll be fun.
Well, I really appreciate having you on, Scott, and I appreciate you taking your time to talk to us and tell us stuff.
No problem.
So
I apologize about not being able to prepare so well. I had that little, like I said, it was, I guess, 8 days ago now. The wife broke her ankle and she's been laid up. And that sucks.
Well,
We tell you what.
right.
Oh, man.
That's
you start
life,
to realize
man.
all the things they do around the house that you
Who's-
didn't
I thought you were about to
appreciate. Now
tell
you
the-
appreciate it.
Those,
thought this
those
was the
piles
bat-
of dishes
bat
must
story.
be just this high.
No, I'm kicking ass at the dishes, but it's a lot of work, man. But I knew she's like, this sucks. We're gonna have a 10-foot tall pile of dishes in 2 days. I'm like, no, god dang it, I'll conquer the dishes. I've done that. I get the dog his meds. So far, I haven't screwed any of that thing up. I almost forgot the trash the other day. I heard the trash truck coming and hauled ass out there in my flip flops in 20-degree weather. And got that taken care of. But anyway,
catch.
so sorry about that. But otherwise, I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's fun. It's a cool format. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, buddy.
The one last thing before we go, we always ask
Sure.
all of our guests, hardtop or sedan?
Hard top.
Winner,
Sorry.
chicken dinner.
No.
Okay. He was
We'll get him
good.
next time.
That's
We'll
fun.
get him next time.
We're all good.
Post gang.
All right. Well,
I'm a hard top guy for sure.
It's the only
awesome.
way.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight and watching and listening. And really want to thank Scott for joining us, and Craig and Joe. Thank you for helping me out here, co-host. I know I spent most of the night quiet just because you guys took over the show, and that's all right because that's one of the nights I can just push back and just listen and enjoy.
We got questions.
Oh, all right. Well,
Very good.
thanks, and that'll do it for tonight. We'll talk to you guys again next time.